Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show on this Tuesday, the 3rd of May, 2022. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. I'm going to talk about, right now, the dangers if you guys, for the ones out you guys are sitting on a lot of cash, or maybe not exactly cash, maybe bank credit. In other words, you're sitting on, maybe you got a large savings account or something at the bank, and you're sitting there. In other words, you got a lot of dollars. Or maybe you're in the United Kingdom. Maybe you got a lot of Great British pounds. Or maybe you got a lot of Australian dollars or Canadian dollars. But you're sitting on a lot of fiat currency right now. And you guys are in a great deal of danger of losing an awful lot of the money that you've accumulated. Maybe it's your life savings. Maybe it's your retirement fund. I just don't know exactly what your situation is. Maybe it's something that some family wealth, or gosh knows what, but you might be sitting on a lot of money in the bank or in cash, but it's denominated in the fiat currencies, and you don't realize it, but you're in a lot of potential danger right now. And one of the reasons why is because right now, during this period in time, cash is strong right now. Dollars in the bank is strong right now, very strong, and it's actually gaining strength. And where it's gaining this support is from the central banks in their desperate bid right now to fight inflation. Now, a little while ago, they were talking about 50 basis point rate hikes by the Central Bank of the United States, which is Federal Reserve. And now they're marking in what could be a very large rate hike of 75 basis points. This would be a market desperation by the central banks if they go with a 75 basis point. But it's starting to look like there's about a 98% chance out there, according to reports that I'm receiving, that they will go with a 75 basis point rate hike. You say, well, why is that a danger to the dollar? Isn't that just going to make the dollar stronger? And yeah, you're right. It probably will in the short term. But this what it yields is actually a greater danger than ever for your dollars. Even though in the short term, your purchasing power is going to be held strong. And, other things that you could invest in right now, things like cryptocurrencies, gold, silver, have been taking an awful beating, quite seriously, in the past little while, past month or so. I mean, we've looked at the silver price come down from like $26 down to $22 and change. We've seen the cryptocurrency price has been taking a beating. It was up around $68,000 for a Bitcoin, and now it's settled in below $40,000. That's a significant loss, especially for people who purchased when it was up around $68,000. So you're saying, well, why should I buy these things if they're going down and the dollar's holding its strength or gaining? Shouldn't I stay in my money in the bank account? Shouldn't I stay with my money in cash or whatever? Well, you're facing a horrendous danger, because right now, over the past number of years, the Federal Reserve has been engaging in quantitative easing and different other money creation programs that lean toward something called modern monetary theory. And in fact, they've used that as a tool to stimulate the economy through the enormous COVID crisis. And also, they used it as a tool after 2008 to prop up the world's financial system by over-leveraging the system by creating more and more liquidity in the system. Well, the dollar started to turn over. Turnover, I mean, it started to descend toward inflation and even hyperinflation. And this has caused this last-ditch effort by the central banks to try to quell in or rein in this inflation that's happening right now. And this is what's given the dollar strength. But at the same time, the inflation's still there. And it's there in big numbers. It's not going to be stopped. But at the same time, the central banks want to stop it. And they're going to go to any level that they think deemed necessary to stop this forward momentum of inflation. And this means that they're draining liquidity out of the system. But you have to understand something. The very liquidity that they're draining out was the liquidity that propped the system up. So, it's kind of like if a person went to a picnic, and they had a table there that had a broken leg on, So, maybe the husband went over and took some duct tape and taped a wooden pole to the leg to hold the leg up, And so they got all the picnic stuff on top of the table, and it's being held up by this temporary leg that he put in place with duct tape and stuff that's holding the picnic table up, or the table. What would happen if he goes over and he takes the duct tape off and removes that leg with all the stuff still up on top of the table? Well, it's all going to slide off the table. The table's going to fall, and everything will fall off the table, and it's just a no-brainer. I mean, that's just basic physics. That's obviously what's going to happen. Well, that's what the Fed's doing right now. They propped up this whole entire economy with cheap, easy credit creation with low rates of credit into the system. That's low interest rates. So people would borrow and people would take on loans, and then the money would flow into the system and would prop the system up. And that's how they got the system where it is. That's like the table leg that's holding the table up. Now they're coming in, they're saying, well, there's a little bit too much inflation now because of what we did. Well, they don't blame it on themselves because they're psychopaths. But anyway, they're out there and they're decided that they're going to stop the inflation now. So basically, they're going to remove the leg off the table by straining in and actually withdrawing liquidity from the system. This is called quantitative tightening. So before they were doing quantitative easing, which is loose, easy is loose. It's like loose monetary policy. Put the money out there, lower interest rates down to zero, let all the money flow. Okay? That's like putting the leg on the table with the duct tape. Holds the table up. Great, we solved the problem. We filled the table up with duct tape. And now they're going to go in and pull the leg off the table. So now, the financial system already is moved toward inflation. This is why they're doing this. What do you think it's going to do when the financial system falls, the table falls, which is obviously going to happen when they're pulling the leg off of it? I mean, it's just gravity, it's going to fall. It's already begun to fall, actually. I mean, the stock market hasn't been going up lately. You just watch it. It's not going up. The bond market is not going up. Yeah, well, it is going up, but it's inverse, see? When it goes up, it's going down. So it has been going down. The bond market's yields have been rising, which is a falling bond market. This is going to only increase in speed and intensity, and at a certain point, the Fed's going to have to step in. What do you think's going to happen when they step in this time, if there's already inflation? Well, it's going to be compounded. The effect's going to be much, much compounded from where it is right now. Much more. And what does that do to you? If the inflation rate, the real inflation rate right now is probably between 15 and 20% per year, the real CPI. Now, they've got a metric that they do CPI with now that's really it's garbage. But by the old metric. And you want to know the old metric, go to a site called Shadow Stats. They keep track of that. The old metric. by which they used to calculate the CPI, rather than the new metric that they calculate the CPI. So here's the thing. They're admitting, like, what is it, 8% or something, high sevens or something, 8%. I know it was going up versus 6 and 7 and 8, but that's what they're admitting to. But what they really got is probably closer to 20% inflation. That means you're losing 20% of your dollar every year. And so they're trying to stem that in. And then when they turn the economy over to the downside, they're going to move in the opposite direction. They're going to double or even triple the amount of inflation they have now, which is probably close to 20%. So this means 40 to 60% inflation each year. So you got $100,000 in the bank, right? You can calculate on that losing 20% or close to it and over the course of a year of what you can purchase with those dollars. So basically, if you got $100,000 in the bank, means you right now, the way it is right now, you'd lose right around $20,000 gone. Wouldn't you rather have something? I mean, anything you can buy. It's getting to the point now where you can actually go out. Well, you know, when you buy a new car, when you drive it off the lot, it depreciates. I think it's something like, what is it? By a lot. Anyway, as soon as you drive it off the lot, you buy it and you drive it off the lot, it depreciates in its value. It's going to get to the point where it pays you to get a new car and keep it for a year, because at the end of that year, in dollar terms, that new car is going to be worth, you'd be able to sell it used for more than you bought it new. This is where we're going with inflation. And now, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody, if they got a lot of money in the bank, they want to preserve their purchasing power. Doesn't mean they're going to go out and buy a car. Because typically going out and buying a car is not really to preserve your purchasing power. It's to give you something to drive in. You know? But I'm using this as an illustration. There's other vehicles out there that you can purchase if you've got a lot of money in the bank to hedge against dollar devaluation. And that's what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about dollar devaluation and how it's going to get much, much worse very, very quickly. And you got to act now before the desperation comes in, and all the other people out there, all your friends and neighbors, when they realize this, what I'm telling you on this show right here, when all your friends and neighbors realize it might be too late for you to get to hedge, because you're going to have to pay a heck of a lot more to hedge than right now. See, right now we're talking about something that's before the crisis happens. If you wait until the crisis happens, and everybody else and their dog is going to be wanting to get out there and hedge against the dollar, you're going to have to pay a lot more for these things. So what is the best way to hedge against the dollar? The dollar's devaluation. Well, one is cryptocurrencies. And Bitcoin is probably the number one of all the cryptocurrencies to use as a hedge against dollar devaluation. Bitcoin's a great hedge against it. And, you know, people that have HODL Bitcoin, in other words, hold on for dear life. In other words, they've bought a Bitcoin or a fragment of a Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be a whole Bitcoin. Maybe it's 10% of one Bitcoin. And they basically held it in an offline wallet for years. This is called an HODL, hold on for dear life. They have seen that money that they invested go up and up and up. Some of them have seen 100 times their original investment, even though Bitcoin has come down to under $40,000 right now. So the best policy with holding Bitcoin is to hold it for a long time. The people that have held it for a long time make out really well. And so one of the ways to hedge against the dollar is to actually buy Bitcoin and put it away in an offline wallet and just leave it there and forget about it. It's just as good as having your money in the bank. In fact, much better, much safer, because there's no third party that can come along and say, hey, you know what, you don't have access to your money anymore. Sorry. See, this is another thing people don't know about the banks. People picture, they see that big vault door, you know, impressive. They go into their banks and everything's made out of marble desk, you know, to write on, you know, and all the tellers there, you know, and it all looks so official and all it's very clean, and and big bank vault door, and people think their money is in that vault. No, your money's not there. They don't have it. Yeah, they got a little bit of money. If you want to make a withdrawal from the bank, they can take out some money and give it to you. But ultimately, if everybody that has money in your bank comes in and wants their money right now, they don't even have a tiny fraction of the money. They don't have it. It's not real. It doesn't exist there. Sorry, you know. Yeah, and I mean, they got enough to cover a few people. If one guy comes in and says, "Okay, I want to withdraw this and I want to withdraw that," and he takes his money out of the bank, yeah, they can cover that, provided that not too many people do that, and not many people do, and so they're okay, you know. So, your money is safe in the bank, provided there's not a bank, what's called a bank run or a bank holiday. That's when they close the doors and say, hey, you can't have access to your money. So this is just something for you to think about. Also, I want you to think about right now, with the way inflation is, you're only going to be able to get 80% next year. If you hold your bank money in the bank for a year, you're only going to be able to buy 80% of what you'd be able to buy today. That means that's a 20%, not a sale, but that's the opposite. It's like you're losing 20% of your purchasing power over the course of the next year. This is going to get much worse once the Fed has to renege and turn back on their policy. And they're going to have to. You say, well, Glenn, why are they going to have to return on the policy? Is because the whole world's financial system, what's called the everything bubble, the real estate bubble, the bubble in corporate bonds, the bubble in junk bonds, the bubble in equity markets, the bubble in the bond market, the whole thing is an enormous bubble. It started to be blown up in 2008. It's been blown up until now. To the biggest bubble ever, ready to pop. And what's the thing about bubbles? You ever seen somebody chewing bubble gum, and they start to blow a bubble. You're blowing it, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, Well, that takes time for it to blow up. As the air enters into it and it gets bigger and bigger. But when it pops, it goes pop. It's just, if it's bubble gum, it's all over their face. It just goes pop. Suddenly. That's the way with bubbles. And that's what we have, a system of bubbles out there. They're going to start to pop. And when they start to pop, because the Fed's going to pop them all, the Fed's going to be in a panic to blow them all back up again because it's the whole world's financial system. They can't let it collapse. Say goodbye to your dollars when that happens, because that 20% we have now is going to increase to 40 or even 60% overnight of your money losing purchasing power each year. And do you really want to keep your money in the bank if you're going to lose 50% of it over the course of a year of what you can purchase with it? In other words, if you're living in the United States right now and gas is, say, $3.70 a gallon, okay? And this time next year it's going to be $5 a gallon, sort of thing. And say you go to the dollar store, and this year, last year it was $1, and this year they've raised it to $1.50. It's going to be up to $3 for the same items. Everything, grocery store, a can of beans. If this year it's $1.50, next year it's going to be like $2.80. And so what you can actually purchase with that money if you hold it in the bank. Now, what's going to happen in the opposite with that? With probably silver, with cryptocurrencies, these things that are hedges against the dollar, they're going to keep up with inflation. They will. Right now they're not, because the Fed is busting the whole thing. They're in this mode. So, what are you going to do? Well, the best thing to do is to look at what's happening right now. The fact that they've knocked the price down on these things, like silver is great. Gold is great. Price has been knocked down on gold, silver, been knocked down on cryptocurrencies. They've set up a buying opportunity. A little window of opportunity So that you can get, and it might get a little bit better than it is right now. Price might go down a little bit more before the Fed turns and changes direction. Might even get a little bit better. But ultimately, when it turns and goes the other way, these things are going to keep up with inflation. That means we're looking at significant gains in price in these asset classes. Whereas your dollar's static. It doesn't gain nothing. It doesn't lose anything. It doesn't gain anything. But it does lose to inflation. And this is why I'm explaining to you guys, a dollar's going to be a dollar. Next year, the year after that, the year after that. But what can you purchase with a dollar? I mean, there was a time like 100 years ago when somebody dropped a penny on the ground. It rolled across the ground. A bunch of kids would scramble over to try to get it because they knew that they could take it out to the store and buy what probably would be now equivalent of a full-size chocolate bar. Just a penny. Now there's pennies all over the place. There's change all over the parking lots. People don't even bend down to pick it up because it's practically worthless. Even kids, they don't really even want it hardly anymore, especially if it's just pennies. They might pick up a quarter. But pennies shows you where we're headed, and there's going to be a time coming where there's going to be change all over the parking lots everywhere, and nobody's going to bother with it. The only people that are going to bother with it are really down and out broke people because they can add it together and finally, and the stores probably won't even take it. They'll have to take it to a bank when they get buckets full of it just to get a few dollars, and those dollars ain't going to buy nothing. This is where we're moving. Poverty's going to increase like you wouldn't believe. There's going to be people on every street corner with signs saying, "I need work," or I'm homeless," and all this kind of stuff. The immense amount of human suffering that's going to be generated from what the central banks are doing is unimaginable. But on the other hand, too, they think they know what's better. Well, actually, it's a big power play for money and power and everything else these intellectuals got going on. And they don't care about the common guy. They don't care what happens to you. Quite seriously. They just care about the bottom line for them and their family. Totally greedy. This is what we got running the system. It's corruption. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to my show. And listen, you got to do something now to protect yourself from inflation. Otherwise, you're going to get eat to pieces with it over the next couple of years. It's going to create tremendous amounts of poverty across the land. Bye-bye, guys.